Okay, so today we're going to talk about notes number 9, which is percent problems, which are really going to be similar to the proportion problems that we did in ratio and proportion, because we're going to talk about how we create a percent proportion and then use that equation to solve. So first thing we want to be able to do is we want to be able to have the skill of writing a percent as a decimal or a decimal as a percent, which we don't actually use in our percent proportion, but it's good review for us to go through. And also, there are other ways that we can find solutions to these problems. And so that if I were to try to find, say, 40% of something without using this percent proportion, then I would be converting from decimal to percent and back. So we're just going to do a quick kind of refresher on how percents and decimals are related and why we even care that they're related that way when we set up our percent proportion. So first of all, to write a percent as a decimal, we are taking that percent, okay, and a percent is a number out of 100. So when I say I got 60% of something, that means I have 60%, 60 out of 100%, okay, or out of the total of 100, okay? So percent is always a number out of 100. And if I took that number out of 100, that's where I get the decimal version, which you all may have learned that, oh, I just moved my decimal back 2. The reason I move my decimal back 2 is because I'm dividing by 100, which is going to make that movement happen. So kind of the shortcut that we learn is that we move our decimal place over 2 to take our percent and write it as a decimal. Okay, the reason that is because a percent is a number out of 100. So same idea here, if I had 7 out of 100, 7 100ths converts to 0.07 as a decimal. 3.9, again, take that shortcut, move it over 2 because we know we're dividing by 100, is 0.039. 9% would be 0.09. And this, I think, illustrates it nicely. 100% as a decimal, if I move my decimal place over 2, is 1. And if you think about the fact that it's a number out of 100, well, 100 over 100 is 1. Okay, just to, again, illustrate that point, that that's what's happening. That's why that works. That's why that cheat of moving our decimal over works. And if I have something more than 100, then it's going to be a value more than 1, or in this case, 2.4 as a decimal. And we can use the same concept to write a decimal as a, there's my cat. Okay, we can use that same concept to write a decimal as a percent. So for this, it's saying 0.67. If I were to write 0.67 as a fraction, well, that's 67 hundredths. Okay, the way I convert a decimal to a fraction is I look at the place that this last value is. It's in the hundredths place. This is 67 hundredths. And going back to above, well, a percent is just a number out of 100. So this is 67%. Now what we're doing here really is we're multiplying by 100, okay? We're converting this decimal to a percent. We're going the opposite way. We're moving our decimal to the right 2. So 0.4, if I go to the right 2, is 40%, which 0.4 as a fraction would be 4/10. If I then write that over 100, it would be 40 hundredths, 40%. 0.82 is 8.2%. 9.22 is 922%. 0.002 is 0.2%. And 13 is 1,300%. Okay, so that's just a kind of refresher on skills we should already have, which is moving from decimal to percent or from percent to decimal. Now we use this concept in these equations to set up a proportion where we know that our percent is a number out of 100. And we can, when I read my sentences here, many times there's an is or an of, but percent out of 100, the percent is a part and the 100 is the whole amount. Okay, so percent out of 100 equals the part that I'm talking about out of the total amount. And the total amount's not always going to be 100 in these sentences, right? So part out of whole is going to be equivalent to a number out of 100. Looking at the word problems, many times the part is connected to the word is, and the whole is connected to the word of. So we're going to look at a few examples together, okay? So our first example is that what is 30% of 70 feet? So first of all, I have my percent. So I'm going to say 30 out of 100. Okay, 30%. What? So there's my variable. What is 70% or 30% of 70 feet? See the is and the of? So it's saying out of a total, out of the whole 70 feet, so whole goes in their denominator, what part of 70 feet would be 30%? Okay, X. What is 30% of 70? Is over of percent out of 100. Now this looks like a proportion. We know how to solve proportions. We cross multiply. So that gives me 100x equals 2,100. And I divide by 100, and x equals 21. Now I want you to answer these in words. So the question is, what is 30% of 70 feet? So I'm going to answer that 21 is 30%, 21 feet is 30% of 70 feet. Okay, there's my response to the question. And it says number compared to the base. So it's calling this value the base. And comparing this unknown to a base of 70 feet. Or we could have the base number unknown, which means the whole part. Okay, so here this is the part is unknown. Now this time our whole value will be the unknown. So this says $14 is 25% of what amount? Again, there's the is, here's the of, here's my percent. So percent out of 100, 25 out of 100 is equal to part, so $14 is 25% of what amount, of what whole dollar amount. Okay, I cross multiply and I get 25x equals 1,400. And I divide by 25, and so I have 1,400 divided by 25 gives me 56. Now I'm going to respond to this question, and I'll say $14 is 25% of $56. Now on that one, and even on 30%, I know that there's other ways to do this. I want to see you set up the percent proportion. So 25%, we also can, many people consider that a fourth. So I could have just multiplied by 4 to get the total amount. Up here, 30%, many people know to find 10%, and then I can just multiply that by 3. Okay, 10% would be 7 times 3 is 21. There are other ways to do these problems. We're focusing on the percent proportion. Okay, so that's the work you want to practice doing, is that setup and how to solve that proportion. The last setup that we may see is that the percent is unknown. So here it says 135 is what percent of 27? Okay, so my percent out of 100 is unknown. And 135 is what percent of 27? Okay, there's my setup. Now notice 135 is bigger than 27, so this percent is going to be more than 100. Okay. Cross multiplying gives me 27x equals 13,500, and dividing by 27, x is going to equal 500. I'm kind of using a cheat of a calculator. You won't have a calculator on your quiz, or if the problems are decimal answers, I'll let you know that you can use a calculator. I'm just kind of trying to make our notes a little faster and use a calculator instead of thinking through there. I should have thought through. So there's my answer, and I'm going to write it as a sentence. Now, so this is important. Okay, we found a percent. So when I write my final answer, whether I'm having it circled here or over here, I'm going to say 135 is 500% of 27. So when we write our answer, because we found a percent, we should have a percent attached to that number. Okay. So if you flip this page, you'll see 6 more percent problems. And what I'd like for you to do is set up those percent proportions. I just want you to go through and set them up, okay, for each of these. What do you think the setup is? And then continue the video and check your setup. Then I'll have you pause again and solve them. So I want you to go through all of them and set them up, and then we'll continue and solve them. Okay, so I have all my setups here. Making sure I'm matching up the is as the part of as the whole. That's a good hint to set up. Percent is always over 100. So go through and check your setup. The last one was a little bit flipped around. So first it gave me the percent. So 2%, so 2 out of 100, of what amount is 200. So the 200 is 2% of the whole amount that we want to find. Okay, so again, check your setups on the last 4. Okay, now that you've checked your setups and made any corrections that you needed to, I want you to go through and solve. Okay, so let's see how we did. So on the first one, cross multiplying, we get 100x equals 2000. Dividing by 100, I can just cancel those zeros. On number 2, make sure you had a percent as part of your answer, because what you were finding was the percent. And I didn't write the sentences. I didn't have space to write the whole sentence over again, but I did make sure that I added units or the percent symbol when I needed to. So like on 3, it was in feet, so my answer has feet. It says 42% is 50% of what length. Obviously 50, it's pretty easy to find the 84 feet in your head. I get that, but we're gonna go practice setting up this proportion. And with the ones that we don't need a calculator for, sometimes they are ones we can do in our head, but we want to be able to find that correct proportion, correctly cross multiply to get to that 84 feet. On this one, when we cross multiply, when I divide by 100, we know we can just move our decimal in 2. So that's how I get the 262.5. On 5, when I divide by a decimal, I rewrote it as I added a 0 to both. So basically I just, it's like the backwards of reducing a fraction, right? I just made this equivalent fraction, but 10 times larger. So I made it 4,025ths instead of 400 over 2.5. And that's what helped me there, again, without a calculator, be able to find that value. And it is money, so my answer has money in it. I'm cross multiplying here, and we know we can just add zeros on where zeros exist in this problem. So I should end up with 4 zeros because I have 2 here and 2 here. Okay, all that kind of basic stuff with multiplication and division come into play here when we're not using a calculator. Then dividing it by 2 gives me 10,000. Okay, so today you do have a kind of quiz review, mixed review of everything we have done. And you'll see on that homework number 9, 1 through 6 is where this work is. I don't have the key in front of me. Some of these they may be decimal answers. I feel like I tried to go through and make them doable without a calculator. If you need a calculator to check your work on these percent proportions, that's fine. But when you get to 7 and so on, you shouldn't be using a calculator. And then the last video I talked about this. This is all kind of mixed together, all sorts of things we've done.